I'm surprised at the number of Christian leaders I meet that spend time wasted on things that aren't the main thing.
Well, hey everyone, welcome to the Intentional Churches podcast, which gives you practical wisdom and insight into leading your church and aligning to the Great Commission. And we've got a great episode in store for you today, but before we jump in, I want to invite you to consider attending the Intentional Churches conference with your entire staff team next April. At IC, we believe the Great Commission should be a personal mission statement for everyone in your church, and this is the heart behind the Intentional Churches conference. The conference is priced lower than many other church leadership conferences and is designed with your whole team in mind. And the conference is conveniently located in the Midwest this year. So visit intentionalchurches.com/podcast for all the details and to register there. But like I said, we've got a great episode today. And as usual, I'm joined by my friend Doug Parks. What's up, Doug?
Hey, Erin, how are you doing? Thanks for that great commercial for the conference.
Of course. And we have another friend, a new to me friend, but I think him and Doug go way back. And that is our friend Travis Kaiser. What's up, Travis?
Hey, glad to be here.
Yeah, thanks for jumping in with us. Well, the Intentional Churches podcast really exists to just give practical wisdom and insight into leading churches and aligning to like personal ownership of the Great Commission. And so, Travis, we would love to just hear a little bit about you. Who are you? Where are you? What should we know about Travis Kaiser?
Well, I'm Travis, and I live in Northern Kentucky, Florence, Kentucky to be exact, which is 15 minutes south of Cincinnati. Been here 12 years. Originally came on staff as teaching pastor and then have been the lead pastor here for the last 4. Married to Mary Julia. We've been married 20 years this summer.
Wow.
So yeah, let's go. It's good accomplishments. Out of that marriage, 6 kids.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, 2 boys, 4 girls. So I have 6 kids, but only 1 wife.
And no money.
That's good.
And no money. Yeah, it's working out great. It's great. So, yeah, ages 3 to 18. So we cover the gamut. And I have to tell, around here, there's strong historical roots. And so everybody immediately goes, "Oh, you're Catholic." And I'm like, "I'm not." And they don't know what to do with that. So
that's hilarious.
Super fun. Yeah, it's great.
That's funny, man. Because we're, most of our listeners would know I'm in Vegas, and the immediate response when you have 6 kids is, "Are you LDS? And do you have a 15-passenger van or an expedition? Which do you have, Travis?"
Minivan.
Minivan.
Oh, yeah. All right. That'll work. Well, Travis, we love talking about radical alignment. And so today we thought we'd talk about this idea of like leading toward this radical alignment of personal ownership of the Great Commission. So you're a lead pastor. Leadership is what you do, right? So why don't you give us just some context for your church, for Florence Baptist Church? Just give us some context for the place, and maybe like on a scale of 1 to 10, where was alignment when you took the lead role? Let's do some history on Florence Baptist Church.
Yeah, we actually have a ton of history. Our church was started in 1855, and it was in kind of the heartbeat of Florence proper. It was located on Main Street. 15 years ago, the church moved to where we now currently exist in the southern part of Boone County. Right along the interstate. So we're 71 and 75. You're coming out of Louisville or you're coming up from Atlanta right before Cincinnati. Those interstates merge, and that's actually, we're kind of tucked in the corner there. And so it's suburban where we are, but yet we're 15 minutes to downtown Cincinnati. A lot of people around here involved in education or medical care because we have some great medical facilities. Cincinnati Children's is one of the top children's hospital in the country. We have St. Elizabeth Healthcare. Kroger's headquartered here. Fifth Third Bank's headquartered here. So we have a lot of professionals in the area. The school system's really strong and great. When I came on staff, I'm going to back up further than maybe what you said, because it needs a little more context.
Not going to 1855, are you?
We're not going to 1855, even though that's a great story. But in terms of alignment in our staff, when I came on staff 12 years ago, the church was coming out of a long tenured pastor whose vision was to get the church to the new property where we're currently at. But in the process of that transition, most staff had been and still was functioning in silos. And so in terms of team alignment, moving in one direction, we were starting really from ground zero. So the pastor before me, his name's Corey Abney. In the 7.5 years he was here, we did a lot of uphill climbing on alignment. And it was kind of fun to watch. Particularly, he and I are both kind of wired like in personal relationships and engagement. And so we would, you're walking down the hall and you're stopping in people's offices and they thought, "Uh-oh, am I in trouble?" Or you're not like, "What's going on?" You're not supposed, were you actually allowed to talk in each other's offices? Like, it doesn't have to be official meetings. So it's been really fun. And I would say in that 7-year kind of push, we probably got our team, I'm going to say, to like a 6 in terms of alignment. And then when I became lead pastor, I knew I wanted a coach. I'd never served in that role before, though I had various responsibilities in other churches of varying degrees. And so I just knew I wanted a coach. And that's actually where Doug and I first started meeting way back a handful of years ago. And I read the Intentional Churches book. And I'm going to say this. I can't believe Intentional Churches puts in the book what they put in the book. It is unbelievable. It's everything. And that really connected a lot of dots for me in terms of alignment. And that really started our journey. I would say now our staff, we're probably an 8 or an 8.5 on alignment now, moving in the right direction.
That's great, man. And I was just curious, Travis, like when you talk about the pragmatic side of no indictment on the previous leadership or whatever,
none.
It's none about that. There's respect there. But when you guys started, what can you remember any practical things you were doing in that time where, you would walk into somebody's office and they were like, "Am I in trouble?" What things were you doing to break down those silo walls?
Culture. It's culture and relationships. And so it was intentional. Our staff meetings were very, very intentional on the front end about building relationships. And so as an organization to move forward, it really has to move forward. I'll even step. Church is relational. Everything rises and falls on relationship and ministry. And in order for relationships to move towards mission, you got to have trust. And so it was literally just going, "Hey, you said your mom was having health issues. How's she doing?" It's how you care for a family on staff that has a new baby born and what that looks like. It was staff lunches so that you can cut up and share stories and make memories together. And it was how the Christmas party was handled. And so it was a lot of relationship buildings early on to get us out of silos and more into how do we do this as a team.
That's great, man. Great.
Yeah,
it's trust building. Yeah. Go ahead, Erin.
Travis, I'm curious, as you have headed towards alignment, what's maybe the most challenging thing you have faced and overcome as far as alignment is concerned?
Well, it's culture. I mean, to quote Peter Drucker, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And so the most challenging thing is everyone who joined the team or everyone who was already on the team has a certain culture with them. And it is the hardest thing, I think, to pass on to other people. When they join your staff, you can give them the personnel handbook. They've already pilfered through the website on mission and vision, and they can see the events, but its culture is the last thing lagging. And so we're really, really big on culture. If you think about your volunteers come from different degrees of experience, different walks of life. If they were church, they have expectations from different church cultures. When you think of staff, they all have different levels of training, education, gaps in leadership capacity. When you think of your church family, there are people all over the spiritual spectrum, from people who are just checking out the claims of Jesus all the way to mature, believers that are running hard after Jesus, sometimes after many years. And so culture.
One of the things that's really important to I see to intentional churches is this idea. We talk about this on a lot of episodes, that we just really believe that the leader has to personally live the things they're inviting people to jump into. When you talk about radical alignment to the Great Commission, using that as like a personal mission statement. The leaders of the church have to be living the Great Commission as a personal mission statement before they can ever invite other people to do that. And so Travis is like, for a way of kind of modeling that to our listeners, would you maybe tell us a story of one of your ones, someone that's close to you but far from God, that is kind of the center of your heart right now?
Sure. Yeah. A couple stories, but yeah, one, I could not agree more. I really do think the leader embodying the mission is one of the greatest things towards getting your team in alignment.
Mm-hmm.
You have to. And so in a church context, I'll just use our we call them anchors around here. And it's actually built, if you're familiar with intentional church language, it's actually built off the Great Commission engine. But we want everyone to experience Jesus, grow together, make a difference. And our church knows it. Doug, I got a surprise for you later in a little bit before we get off here.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you're going to love it, man. Oh, yeah, you're going to want one.
All right. Surprising.
Yeah, you're going to want one. But you have to embody the mission. So I think in some ways, embodying the mission is tied to what I would call vision drip. And so we can have these Sundays where we go, here is the vision of the church. And this is where we're going in the next year, which is helpful. I think those moments are very helpful. A strategy that I prefer that's better is let's keep dripping the vision all year long. And so I, from the stage, when it comes to experiencing Jesus, I talk about gospel conversations I'm having. When it comes to the fact that we want people to grow together, and we talk about being in rows is helpful, but people grow in circles, whether it be your family at the dinner table or your neighbors sitting in your living room, or at a family gathering, you're in circles, you're growing together, or making a difference with your life where you're serving and using your resources for the sake of the kingdom. I've got to be dripping that, or else my people aren't going to buy into it. And so when it comes to growing together, I want to talk about my small group. And so I will intentionally just say, hey, the other night, I was talking with our small group. Not so much, hey, you should be in a small group because I'm in one, but people will pick up, oh, this guy is living out the thing that he keeps repeating over and over again. So when it comes to, we use the one language.
Yeah.
Yeah. You guys are on board with that. But we use the one language. And one of my ones is Andy. When I met Andy, he was coming with a religious background. He actually taught in a religious school and had a really, really bad experience, both from the school side and the church side. Midweek, he and his wife show up. She's a Christ follower. He is not, even though he's been in religious environments. And he shakes my hand, says, my name's Andy. And oh, by the way, I don't trust clergy. And I said, okay, fair enough. I don't trust all clergy either, so we're in good space.
Yeah.
And really, he just wanted to talk life. He was really kind of figuring out, are you like every other person in ministry I've ever met? Or is this safe? And I mean, for 2.5 hours, we met for the very first time, and he wept through half of it. Just life experiences, hurt, etc. And then that started a relationship. So we would go to lunch and share the gospel. I remember one time we were having lunch. I took the receipt. We had a long receipt, and I walked through Romans Road because he had said, I just want what my wife wants. And I'm like, okay, well, here's how you can have it. So I walk through Romans Road gospel presentation, and we get to the end. He goes, I'm not there yet, but tell me more. And I'm like, okay, what's my next evangelism bullet I've got? And so it's 3 circles. So I walk through the 3 circles of evangelism. We get through that. And he's still like, okay, well, explain a little more. And I'm like, I'm starting to run out of bullets here. So then I did the bridge illustration, like navigators back in the day.
You're pulling them all out.
We get done with lunch. I'm like, I have nothing else left. Evangelism explosion, faith outline. I mean, we've got everything. And literally he goes, I understand, I'm just not there yet. And what was cool is using the language of the one. Andy wasn't just my one; he was the one of multiple people in our church, which was really cool. That God was using these cross sections, kind of using some of the old language of God as the hound of heaven, and he's in hot pursuit of people far from Him. And it was really cool to see that for the story unfold. And cool enough. This past spring, Andy trusted in Christ, and we got to baptize him in June, and that was really. It was. I wasn't the one that was able to lead him to the Lord, but can I share the text? You care if I share the text? He sent. Here's what he sent me. Here's what he sent me. He says, it took me 59 years to be able to say that I've repented and I believe in Jesus.
Wow. 59 years, man.
And around all kinds of religious contexts where people were talking about God, Jesus, the Bible, faith. And so there he was.
I'm curious,
really awesome.
Like, what do you think, Travis? Was there a pertinent moment, or was this the sum total of all the energy of we use Luke 15 for our listeners who don't know, as using the 99 of our sheep. Was it just the full on energy of the sheep or toward this one, or was it more, there was a pertinent moment? What do you think got him over to that point?
I think he approaches faith mostly from like an intellectual standpoint. And so I think it was just the sum total, God stacking moments one after the other that became compelling over time, that this really is true, that Christianity really does answer life's deepest, hardest, most ultimate questions in the best way possible. Even if you compare them to other world religions, Christianity answers those questions best. And I finally think he got to the tipping point where he says, this is it. I mean, obviously God's drawing, the Spirit moving.
Right. And the relational, trust building and all that. But I think for our listeners who are church leaders, I think what you're hitting on is a principle we really try to go after. And you need to remind your congregation of this. Sometimes our hyper-responsible Christians, when they hear about evangelism or thinking about people who are far from God or whatever the terminology your church uses in your relational network, it brings guilt, shame, and high responsibility people are like, I don't know what to do. And, I feel uncomfortable and all these things. But what I love about the story you just told is we need to remind our congregations that the work of God in somebody's life, if believers are on mission, the way Jesus called us to be, it's very dynamic. And you don't know at any time who's planting and watering and following up and investing relationally. And like you said, I've been around a lot of intellectual people who are trying to get there with Jesus, but they just need to get over the hump. Sometimes it just takes that 4th or 5th version of drawing on the back of a receipt to help them intellectually get over that hump. So, and
I didn't know this. Actually, another guy in our church who is friends with Andy actually said, I was actually sharing with the story with our deacons, and he's this friend of Andy's one of our deacons, and he said, hey, you know what? He carries that receipt around with him. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I mean, it was from this restaurant where we had lunch. I'm like, he carried that around. But however, God chose to use that. And I wasn't the one, I wasn't like there in the moment when he crossed the faith line or whatever. I wasn't there for that. But, it was so cool that just to be a small part of the story, super awesome. And then we baptized him at the end of June. And already it was neat. Within the first few weeks, he was actually asking our adult discipleship pastor, hey, I've got this next door neighbor. He's like 20 years old. Can somebody come help me? He needs to be on the team. He needs to learn about Jesus. Can someone help? And it was full circle. Really cool.
That's good, man. And for all the church leader talk about multiplying and multiplication, that is the very root level of it when you hear it, especially in a new believer. It's just almost innate in them to want others around them they love to know it. So
no
that's
doubt.
good, man. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Travis, I'm curious, like we talk a lot about radical alignment, and you just shared a story of like your own alignment and your own bringing the Great Commission, like your own personal ownership of that. I'm curious how you've brought alignment in your board, if you have a board of elders or leadership team, whatever that looks like how have you sought alignment in that area?
Sure. Our structure is a little different than that. We're a staff-led church, deacon-supported. If somebody wanted to press us on the elder language, it would be our male pastoral staff. But we're staff-led, and so but that's important, right? So the question is, how do you get staff and leaders on board with the mission? Again, I go back to culture. Culture is a massive piece. But I think on staff, or even if it is a board you're working with, meetings, every meeting you have has to be about mission. I mean, it is mission at all cost. And it doesn't matter who you are or what you do. If you're a Chick-fil-A manager, shouldn't every meeting you have be about how to make Chick-fil-A the best restaurant it can be in that space, and doing what you do in serving chicken and serving people? Yeah, it should be. And the same's true for the church. And I heard a guy this week, he was a former seminary president, and it's Jeff Orge. And he said, I'm surprised at the number of Christian leaders I meet that spend time wasted on things that aren't the main thing. Mm-hmm. And I was like, wow, this is a guy who was training leaders for ministry, and he's been in a ton of context. And he was like, man, you can just waste a lot of time. And you can be in a staff meeting and talk about the things you like and all that. Or they can be about mission. And so I think meetings intentionally, not that there aren't other things attached, right? I mean, it is. What does the budget look like? You have to deal with that. But it's mission. Even the budget conversations about mission. So I think that's how you work it with staff and leaders. And I'll say this: here's something I've found to be true. You know that the mission has sunk down to the staff level when they are willing to correct the leader in the meeting.
Yeah.
And the moment where I've been trying to go, hey, I think this is the direction, and someone goes, wait a minute, how does that match up with our mission again? Good point. Then that means they have it.
Yeah, I like that. One of the things we've experienced in my context is I just heard this a couple weeks ago, where someone was leading a meeting, and after the fact, a few people on our staff said, yeah, that just didn't feel like us. And what they're saying is that doesn't feel like how the culture and the kind of the DNA of who we're becoming, that felt in contrast to that. And so when you get to a place where people know what us means, for exactly. Your context and your place, I just agree with what you're saying. When someone's willing to challenge any person in authority and say, yeah, I knew what you were doing, but it didn't feel like us how you got there. It's like, okay, that's important.
But you clearly have to define what us means.
Oh, yeah, of course.
So it goes back to people will fill in the gaps with whatever you haven't provided for them.
Yep.
And so as the leader, you've got to fill in the blanks for them. So your team's not guessing what us means. Or sometimes we use the language around here like, oh, our DNA is. When you say that, your team should clearly know and be able to define what DNA means or us means.
Yeah, I think, the point we're making right now for a lot of church leaders and our listeners is that you don't even know like how much you've slipped, even myself, into assuming everybody is tracking. And so then your conversations become more about, we fall in love with our ideas or the ideas we heard from another church or the program or whatever. And not as an indictment, but if we just remember, most people on a staff did not get into ministry for ideas and programs and everything else. They got in because they wanted to spread the gospel. And I think when Travis is highlighting, even you, Erin, is that where we get in trouble is when we assume, oh, we got the mission. We've said that several times. Now we can get into the tactical And then meetings more and more, like you're talking about, Travis, become that. So I think for our listeners, I'd encourage you to stop for a minute and ask yourself the question, where are the places where I'm leading that I've assumed mission is owned? And really do an audit on yourself, because if you just bring that awareness, most leaders, most of our listeners are going to bring it back to that basic and fundamental and get creative ways to do like what Travis is saying.
Yeah, or just clear. Maybe there's the first step before that is the mission known? Have we been clear about the mission? You can't play leadership whack-a-mole at the mission. It's a moving target all the time. You'll never win. You need a clearly defined mission. And so for some, I'll go back to our time, Doug. It was a great exercise for our staff going through 2 days so that we could find common language and be clear on the mission. I mean, that we've not looked back.
Travis, one of the things we love to do on this podcast as we kind of wrap up our conversation is just give really practical kind of insight and advice to our listeners. Like, from your perspective, your experience of like pursuing this radical alignment towards the Great Commission in your staff and congregation, if you could offer just like to our listeners, what's the first one or two things you would advise someone do if they're seeking greater alignment?
Sure. I'm not trying to be a broken record on any of this. I just think there are some core things. One would just be communicate openly and often about the mission. And that means formally and informally. And so for me, sometimes it's in preaching. So we know vision leaks. It leaks with staff. I just think through, like, the average church person is not thinking about the church the other 6.5 days of the week. They're thinking about, I've got this bill to pay, and how am I going to get my kid through college, and the car's got to get fixed. They're not thinking as hard about the church as we are. And so you have to keep repeating. So one of the things we do every August, we re-preach the mission. And so we go through a series, Experience Jesus, Grow Together, Make a Difference. And we talk about, really the 99 needs to go pursue the one. So we use the language of we exist for those who aren't here yet. Doug, here's my surprise for you.
All right.
Sometimes you even got to put it on logos, right? Check this out, man.
Whoa, man. For everybody listening, the t-shirt says 1 is greater than 99. Leave the 99 and find a 1 in the back, man. That is awesome. How do I get one of those?
Dude, I'll send you one. One. I knew you would love it.
Yes.
I told you. But you just gotta keep repeating it. If you're a blogger, if you're a pastor and blogging's one of your spheres, you should blog about the mission. If it's your social media, drip the vision through your social media in between pictures of your kids' baseball games. I mean, it's hallway conversations. It's after meeting conversations. I mean, we all know this to be true organizationally. The most important conversations happen in the hallway. And the hallway is what I've found both with staff and our church people. The hallway conversations are really the check that people are looking for, because that's where they go, does he really believe the mission? Or is just that something cool for him to say from the stage? But is he living the mission?
That's golden.
I mean, that is huge. So I would just keep openly and often keep speaking about the mission. You got to say it over and over again. And it looks unique. So like with our deacons and key volunteers, it's not so much, I approach it a little different than like staff. You can say like, you're getting paid to do the mission, but with volunteers, it's a little softer. So like with our deacons or our key leaders, I'll just say, hey guys, tell me about your one, tell me their names. You immediately know who has a one that they're pursuing and in relationship with and trying to share Christ with them. And you know who doesn't, which means then you know privately to come around and go, how can I help you? Who's in your life? Who can I pray for about with you that you can start a conversation to even think about sharing the gospel with somebody someday? I did this with our staff in an all-staff meeting coming out of like Easter. And I just said like, hey, raise your hand if you had a one show up this weekend. Half of our staff raised their hands. It doesn't mean the other staff hadn't asked, because like I had a one I'd asked to come, and they, for like the 6th time they turned me down, but it just keeps showing mission. So communicate. The second thing is allocate resources. I mean, you got to put your money where your mouth is. And so that's true, like with the financial budget kind of things. I think it's also true with personnel. I think particular to churches that are in, wealthy areas, I think sometimes we can get kind of top loaded with staff. What we should start with is the staff we're looking at vital to the mission? Rather than, I would even say, like, our comfort, even as the lead pastor, is this going to help my comfort because it's going to free me up to do some other stuff? Because I would say the mission's even bigger than my ego, and the mission's bigger than my pet projects, and it's the mission. Everything's about the mission. So even with personnel and money, is the money, how close is the money driving us to accomplishing the mission? And then the third thing I would say is you got to cut out what's not contributing to the mission. Aside from culture, I think the next hardest thing for organizations is saying no. And really, church is saying no. And so there are programs that we used to have, we don't have anymore. There are, things shift. Things used to be one way, now they're a different way because we've been working on alignment to mission. And that's really, when I think about the people connected, saying no, it's really hard for people outside of the organization to understand. But I tell you who appreciates it, the people on the inside, because you've given them incredible clarity about where they need to go and what they can say no to and what they need to say yes to. And so the people who appreciate it are all the people inside, key volunteers at every level, staff, etc.
That's awesome. Travis, thank you so much. So many little nuggets there. I hope our listeners were catching on to what he was saying. Even just those 3 kind of practical next steps that he just laid out for us. I think if all of us spent time reflecting on those, our churches would be helped and greater aligned. So, Travis, thanks for jumping in with us today. Just appreciate you,
Sure
your leadership, all the insights you shared. Doug, as usual. Looks like Doug scored a free T-shirt out of this podcast episode.
Yes.
So let's
Travis,
go. That's
thanks,
awesome.
man. You guys killed it. You're killing it. And every listener should know your church is rocking because of the things you're speaking today. Thanks for doing this, man.
Well, super kind. Intentional Churches, you were at the beginning of the story. And so you guys have helped us so much in this area of alignment, common language, systems, structures, tools, etc. I was actually bragging on Intentional Churches this week. I was trying to compel a couple pastors to jump on board with you guys. Start with the book. The book is compelling in and of itself, and keep pressing into the IC resources.
It's great. Well, to our listeners, thanks for listening to the Intentional Churches podcast. And just remember that the Intentional Churches Conference is next April, and it is designed for your whole team. So make sure you visit intentionalchurches.com/podcast for all the details and to register. Travis, Doug, we'll see you soon. And to our listeners, we'll see you next time.